Hello once again and welcome to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botza. I have the great pleasure in welcoming back Mr. Godfrey Bloom once again. Godfrey is famous in the United Kingdom and growing throughout the rest of the world. He's a former member of European Parliament for UKIP. He is an officer in the British Army. He achieved the rank of Major, and he is also a fantastic hedge fund managing expert, and he knows a lot about the financial world, the comings and goings of the city, the stock market. We recommend you always check out his website and his channel, and we'll leave all the links to that. But without further ado, are you well, sir?
I'm extremely well, and thank you for inviting me on your show again. It's always great fun.
Exactly. We tried to have a little bit of fun and a little bit of a jape and a little laugh along the way, because sometimes that's all you can do is have a laugh at this absolute madness that we see before us. But firstly, if I may, Godfrey, if I can take you to Ukraine. Now, the situation there is escalating by the day. Obviously, we've just had the attacks in the Moscow concert hall, which Mr. Putin in Al Jazeera today, he said it's ISIS, but it's ISIS with Ukrainian Western links. The West are obviously denying everything. A few days before the attack, President Trump actually came out and said ISIS are the puppets and tools of Barack Obama. Barack Obama visited Downing Street slightly before this all kicked off. But I was wondering if you can give us an overview into that situation, who you think's responsible as well, and where are we going with this?
Well, it's quite an interesting one, that really, because it was particularly incompetently carried out, that attack in Moscow. I think it was quite carefully planned, but then the attack itself was botched. This strikes me as being an act of desperation. We know the war is over. It's only a matter of time. And I have been suggesting to people, and I've been covering this now for 3 years, about how it started, what the Russian point of view is, where we would end up. And I think I might have said it on your program a little while ago, when Bernard Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery, was actually speaking at the Royal College of Defence Studies to officers, and they said, "Can you give us, before you go, sir, can you give us one tip, just one tip that you'll stay with us?" And he said, "Yes, never march on Moscow." That was in 1947, I think. Now, you cannot beat the Russians on their own territory. You just can't. Nobody ever has. Nobody probably ever will. And of course, what has shocked the Americans is that the Russian technology, the technology of their weapons and organization, is so superior to that of the Soviet Unions that they are shocked. They didn't realize, frankly, that the Russians were that good. And of course, they've had 3 years to get even better. And that includes their logistics and their weapons production systems. We've also been shocked, have we not, that although the Americans spend $1 trillion a year on defense, that most of their kit isn't really very good. We've also got to bear in mind, and I don't say this lightly, and I have a lot of very good American friends, the Americans haven't won a war since 1945. I mean, if they were a horse, you wouldn't back it. If they were a football team, you wouldn't support it. They are woefully incompetent. Every single thing they do is a dog's breakfast. So this is a little bit, I saw a fight in a bar once, and a chap was, years ago, I was a young man, a chap was actually getting fairly badly beaten by a chap who actually knew how to use his dukes. Wasn't shooting, that's just how it was. And the guy in the end, he sort of, just before he ran away, he spat. He spat at the guy. And I thought, oh dear.
Yeah.
You've just humiliated yourself. And this is a bit like that. There's obviously some sort of Ukraine, CIA, ginger group, whatever it was. I don't know. We don't know. We might never know, but I think we probably will know eventually, because I should think the Russian interrogation techniques are probably fairly sound, if you get my drift. So they will spill the beans. It's the act of a dying power, the Ukraine, backed by the United States. It's dying, it's over. And if the Americans or if the West really cared about the Ukraine and the Ukraine people, they would finish it now and get round a table with no preconditions and say, how can we save Ukrainians and the Ukraine? You know, what can we do? The Russians don't want the Ukraine. The Ukrainians don't like the Russians. The Russians are there to stop the expansion of NATO and protect ethnic Russians, which is how a lot of this all started, of course. This war is unnecessary. It should never have started. There was a deal on the table which Boris Johnson spiked. I regard him as a war criminal of the worst possible kind. And if you're watching this, Boris, sue me. Yeah, go on, I'll meet you in court. You prove I'm not right, because I think you're a disgrace. And I think since you pulled that from the table, I would argue at least 300,000 young Ukrainian soldiers have been killed, and probably another 100,000 or 200,000 badly maimed. Not to mention the young Russians that were killed, that will be another 25, 30 or 40,000. Be it on your shoulders, Boris. And originally Joel Stoltenberg, the Washington neocons, and all the other criminals that run West these days. Disgraceful, and that's where we are. It'll be over by September. And I think if we don't go to the table, if NATO doesn't go to the table, or the Washington neocons, there will be a Russian flag flying over the town hall in Kiev. No question about it. It doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah, well said, Godfrey. And I think on the Boris Johnson point, I think Boris Johnson may well be remembered the same way we remember Tony Blair as a war criminal who started a completely needless war and made money on the back of it. But just a little bit more, the terrorists who may well be ISIS, they may well be puppets of NATO and the West, they were caught making good their escape via Ukraine. And this is what Putin's saying. Why were they heading to Ukraine? And as, of course, you said, they will get the information out of them. Getting captured wasn't part of that plan.
Which suggests to me that it wasn't a jihadi situation. They would have died in the attack. It would have been a kamikaze attack, because that's what they do. They wouldn't have then tried to escape to spend the money that the Ukrainians or the Washington neocons had provided for them. But these are dark arts and deep waters. I wouldn't be surprised if we're not involved. It could be MI6. We have our own bad guys. We have our own bad guys, and we know we probably have 300 people in there of some description anyway, helping target the rockets, so on and so forth. And eventually, I'm afraid to say, they will be captured and paraded on TV, and they'll go to the gulag, and it will serve them right. We have no war with Russia. There's no declared war with Russia. We have no treaty with the Ukraine. And I would counsel, I speak as an ex-soldier, you cannot be given an order which is illegal. If you have been ordered to the Ukraine to help guide rockets in the combat zone, that is illegal, and you cannot be ordered to do it. So when you get captured, you will not be protected by the Geneva Convention. And more fool you.
Indeed, sir. I mean, President Putin has already said the gloves are off now after the attack in the concert hall in Moscow. And eventually, as you said, this is going to run out of steam. The people like Grant Shapps, Tobias Ellwood in America, you've got Blinken and Kirby. These people, these warmongers that are sending young men into the meat grinder of Ukraine should face trial for their acts. But will they?
Well, I'd like to see them in The Hague, being internationally prosecuted. But as the West runs The Hague, I can't see that happening. But then we didn't. There are some people we should have hanged in 1918, weren't there? Really?
Yes.
For getting us into that.
Yes.
I've always said I've got a whole list of people I think it would be useful to actually imprison for a very long time. And they're warmongers, they are central bankers, and they're WEF stooges. We don't have Whitehall Palace anymore, but King Charles III, I rather fancy, would look very good on a plinth there, getting his comeuppance. The Archbishop of Canterbury, like Archbishop Laud, was taken to the stake. I'd put him on the stake as well. No, I'd fettle a lot of these people up. As the French would say, I think it was Voltaire said, pour encourager les autres. I don't want to see any more of these people crawling back into our society.
De rien, monsieur, de rien. Now, that brings us quite nicely on to a term that we're using a lot these days on Herd Immunity News, and that's the traitor class. Nigel used to talk about the political class, but we have a traitor class. Now, the word traitor was at its height in the United Kingdom in 1841, where there were so many different historical changes going on in the country. We had civil wars, we were fighting in America, we were fighting with the French. But the word traitor is now making a comeback, Godfrey. And when you see all these acts against us, these are willful acts now. Whether it be locking us down, whether it be injecting us with trial deadly medications that they know about, taking us to war, net zero, the lunacy of all these programs, they can only use the "we were just following orders" Nuremberg excuse for so long before we actually call them for what they are, and that's traitors to the British people.
Yes, they are. That there's no question. I mean, we are deliberately having mass immigration. It's the same in the United States, in order to degrade our country and degrade our society and degrade our culture and everything else. This is the problem. It's quite deliberate. Otherwise, as I've said many times before, we would have mobilized the Royal Navy and stopped these people coming across. We stopped Philip of Spain. We stopped Napoleon. We stopped the Kaiser. We stopped Hitler. Does anybody really believe that we couldn't stop them coming across if we wanted to? Or if they put Bloom in charge, put me in charge.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd fettle it up. I'd fettle it up by Sunday. By Sunday.
I'd love it. I mean, they're throwing petrol on the fire and hand grenades into our homes and warning us of the danger of fire. I mean, they're going to war with these Islamic nations, or they're blowing up, or they're working in proxy wars like Ukraine. And then we have open borders to people from Russia. We have open borders to people from Palestine, you name it, Afghanistan. So this lunacy that it's simply they don't want to upset the European Court of Human Rights, it's absolute abomination. And it's more people like yourself and maybe our little channel that have to keep banging on until we get something done about it.
There is also a very deliberate policy to bankrupt the country. The spending, the overspending, the complete disregard of fiscal probity by this government and previous governments are just the same. We now have over £2 trillion in debt. The Americans are 33 trillion in debt. The cost of servicing it is outrageous. You do never hear, do you, at an election time, any political party suggesting that we should cut public spending, which is the only way that we can save ourselves. We have to stop spending. And what did I read this morning? Keir Starmer is getting together with the Labour administration in Cardiff to spend something like £6 billion on a floating wind farm off the North Wales coast. And sometimes I think it's April Fool every day. We all know these things don't work. We know solar power is useless in this country. Net zero and open border immigration is designed to destroy the country in the globalist interest. And it's what they say they're going to do. It's not a conspiracy theory. They want to get rid of the nation state. They want to get rid of ordinary people's political rights. It's not a theory. I call myself on my Twitter account now a conspiracy analyst because the theory is long gone. It's happening. They're quite upfront about it. They're all upfront about it. So I like to analyze it to say, what are they doing? How are they doing it? And of course, the one thing, I did mention this on your program, I think, before, and it's very well worth mentioning again. Our protection, we have two main protections in this country. That is the principles of English law, or indeed Scottish law, but that's another story. But the principles of English law, which is fundamental to our constitution, and a free press. That's our protection. That is the shield for the man on the Clapham omnibus. And they've gone. We have no protection. So we either have a WEF stooge in Sunak, an ex-Goldman Sachs crook, or we have Keir Starmer, who is cut from exactly the same cloth. And of course, we have reform, probably as the third choice, which is so fake, I can't believe it, I mean, just fake, Yeah. So where do we run to? What can we do? Very sad situation. It's no different in Western Europe, and it's no different in North America.
That's very true. I mean, you and I have spoken about the failure of the political party system completely. And that's perfectly illustrated with the point you're making about Richard Tice. Now, many people are saying that this is controlled opposition, that on the big subjects such as war, there's Richard Tice going marching across to Ukraine with supplies to these people. They've been given billions, something like 80, 90 billion by the US. We've committed to 14 billion. And there's Mr. Tice going across, God bless him, whether he thought it was going to get him votes. But the voters aren't interested. More people are listening to the likes of you, the centre-right, even the leftists are listening to you because you're making sense. It's irrefutable what you're saying now. It really is irrefutable. As you say, you've coined the phrase, you're a conspiracy analyst, because there's so much data to look at now. It's unavoidable. If you were to take this into a court of law, for example, net zero, the IPCC have said themselves it would take between 250 and 1,000 years before we see any significant change in sea level. I mean, it's time that we call this what it is. It's a busted flush.
Yes, and I don't see how. I mean, the reason there's been no reform of the BBC is because governments need it, because it's a mouthpiece for the major policies of government. They nip around the ankles sometimes on things that don't necessarily matter, but all on the big things of the day, the BBC will support the government policy, which is the same as the opposition policy. And these people, let's look at Laura Cheeseburger, the political correspondent for the BBC, on something like £300,000 a year. She hasn't asked a relevant question in her entire career. Yes. You've got, I think it's Nick Beale, the defence correspondent of the BBC, who doesn't know an able seaman from a field marshal. He's almost retarded. So what's the point? He's not. And if you go back, if you look at the Daily Telegraph, Conlon, the stuff he writes is written by the CIA. It's got CIA fingerprints all over it. And you and I know Operation Mockingbird, CIA have unaudited billions of dollars at their disposal to buy Mickey Mouse people like Conlon, to give them the CIA Washington neocon view, which is now supported by the view which is supported by the neocons and the Daily Express. And if you remember, used to be Claire Hollingworth, I think, and John Keegan were the defence correspondents for the Daily Telegraph, who were giants in their field. John Keegan was a military history lecturer at the Royal Military College of Sandhurst. Claire Hollingworth really knew her stuff. And if you go back to the Times, you can go back to Russell in the days of the Crimean War. These people knew their business. So what we've got now, what were leading newspapers like the Daily Telegraph, complete lightweights, banging the drum, talking nonsense, don't know anything about their subject at all, embarrassingly bad. They're not just sort of, well, a little bit off the mark. They are embarrassingly ill-informed. And of course, still we have Daily Telegraph readers, the Blue Rinse Brigade, in the Conservative Party, retired colonels huffing and puffing in their clubs, reading the Daily Telegraph, soaking it up like a sponge. Everything's a lie. Everything the Daily Telegraph op-eds have said so far is a screaming lie. Why would you? You can't even light the fire with a Daily Telegraph because the pages are too big, and it's about nearly £3. Why would anybody bother? Why would anybody reading the Daily Telegraph or watching mainstream media? And of course, people don't, do they? People don't bother. Nobody watches, and they think that's a surprise. But if you're Laura Cheeseburger on 300,000 a year, or Jeremy Vine on Channel 5, bless him. I don't know what's gone wrong there, because 10, 15 years ago, he wasn't as bad as this. I mean, he's now got the sort of outlook and argue and debating ability of the Junior House Debating Society, you know, where you're about 14. In fact, I was much better. Much better.
Well, we miss you on I don't really watch mainstream television unless somebody like yourself was on. I would watch just for the spectacle, like the gladiators going into the Colosseum to destroy these vacuous excuses for journalists. There's no scrutiny whatsoever. But I don't know if you were like me, Godfrey, when you saw them criticizing Vladimir Putin. This is unelected Rishi Sunak with David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, plucked out of obscurity and dropped back in. And they said, Putin's election is a sham and it's a disgrace to democracy.
I know. They have no sense of irony. Do they? I mean, how would you, if you were a WF stooge, ex-Goldman Sachs, and you got to be prime minister through nothing but pure chicanery,
yes,
you'd keep your trap shut, wouldn't you? I would. I'd say, I'm not going to put my head against the parapet until everybody actually calls me out for the tosser I am. But not Sunak.
No. They must think we're suffering from mass amnesia, mass group amnesia, because as we've talked about this before, Sunak was gifted that position as in Richmond, in beautiful Yorkshire, where you reside, sir. He was gifted that position as David Cameron moved in, took Lord Haig out. He got his QC number, and Sunak was parachuted in. Get to the chase, he's told that he's going to be Chancellor. Boris is next to useless, as we all know. He's just a cartoon caricature. He's like something from P.G. Wodehouse, from the dustbin of P.G. Wodehouse's mind. And then he loses to Liz Truss, maybe one of the most incapable ministers that we've ever seen in our lives. The lady that said to gentlemen in England, please, now a bed, think yourself accursed you were not here. Pick up a rifle and head over and start taking pot shots at the Russian army. I mean, it doesn't get any lower than this, does it, as far as British politics and the Conservatives?
They're all terrible. I mean, they're all quite dreadful, aren't they? I can't think of any of them.
No.
I can't think of any of them I'd give the time of day.
No. I mean, and Labour, as you say, Labour are worse, and they do look like winning the next election, or winning by default. Is that fairer to say? I mean, what's your take on the impending doom of the election?
Well, of course, it's fair to say, I think you'd probably agree, that all elections have been on the guy you hate least. Cameron got in because nobody could stand Gordon Brown. So nobody votes for these people. People vote against the other guy. And of course, this has really been going on for quite some time. You vote against. And of course, that's the political system that we have. If you're only given a choice of two people, you're going to pick the one you like better than the other one. But it means you always end up with second best. You always end up with people who are incapable, incompetent, deceitful. And I think I might have said it again when we last chatted. In order to be successful in politics, and when I say that, I mean getting to the top of the greasy pole of your party, every single, well, maybe if you go back far enough, I don't know, but certainly if you go back somewhere in the region of 40 years, every leader of every political party has been a sociopath. big parties or small. You have to be a sociopath because you have to have a mindset which is not like anybody else's. Whereas as a businessman or army officer or whatever it is, you have a code of ethics. You have a moral compass. I'm not suggesting I was a saint, because I most certainly wasn't, and don't claim to be. But if I tell you something or shake hands on a deal, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to stick to it, for the simple reason it's good business. It's good business. I wouldn't have been successful as I was in business if my word wasn't really my bond. Because it's good business, not because I'm clever or a saint, it's because it's good business. These people, of course, with their spin doctors and everybody else, they can lie and cheat, knowing that in a week or two there'll be an editorial from a policy from a paper where the Daily Express or the Daily Mail, which will support the Conservative Party regardless, or the Guardian, who will support the Labour Party regardless, or the Sun or the Daily Mirror. So there is no chastisement for these people who lie and cheat their way through. So politicians are regarded as a genre as the absolute pits, absolute bottom feeders, in the sea of life. But I suppose you would have to be that kind of person. In order to don't forget, if you are in a political party, people in the other political parties aren't your enemy. People in your own political party, because they want your job.
Yes.
I was kicked out of UKIP because I was too popular. And people didn't want me. Everybody had their own ideas, but if somebody's popular in the party, you have to get shot. If you're the leader, you have to get shot. Because one day you think he's going to take your job. So consequently, it's the same with the Conservative Party, it's the same with the Labour Party. It's absolutely essential if you've got somebody who is becoming popular, maybe for the wrong reasons, I don't know. But they are your danger. I always remember, you'll be far too young, and most of your listeners will be too young, to remember a cartoon in the Evening Standard, JJ. And JJ, it was in the days when he had an intercom. You flick the switch and your secretary was outside. And he flicked the switch and he said, "Miss Finch," his secretary was Miss Finch. He said, "Miss Finch, I want you to find somebody in the organization," I'm getting old now, "somebody in the organization who's bright, sharp-witted, somebody capable of taking my place, and sack them."
Well, indeed. And while you were describing that, it made me think of the Reform Party. And they don't have an executive now like UKIP had, because as a former member of UKIP, I remember the howls that would come from conference between the executive and the Nigel fan club. I even think David Curtin, the leader of the Heritage Party, was in that period of time. I'm not sure if I think you might have left by the time I joined.
I've gone by that stage.
Yeah,
I saw the writing on the wall.
Well, you know forecasting. If you know anything, it's forecasting, and you know when the goose has been cooked. But maybe that's why Reform has Richard Tice. That's it. It's nothing more, nothing less than Mr.
I mean,
Tice.
I don't know how many votes that people who would have voted for Reform, when they saw that maniacal face in the Ukraine. I mean, yeah. I know.
Mean you have a problem with that?
He's unelectable, isn't he? He's unelectable. And he stands, of course, four square for nothing in particular. What does he stand for?
Stands for
Nothing.
Elizabeth Oakenshaw, promoting her book, The Matt Hancock Diaries.
Absolutely hopeless. Hopeless.
Yeah.
He basically, what he's saying is, look, I'm a conservative, but I'm not quite as bad as this lot of conservatives.
That's very true. That's very true. And look, you've put the sword to these people metaphorically, of course, because we don't live in the days of chivalry where you could just invite someone out to duel or joust. Those days are gone, alas. Where you could settle a squabble. I know we'd like to bring it back. There's been plenty of people lined up in beautiful Yorkshire, put to the sword in one way or another. But we talk about this class, and it's very difficult to not call them traitors. We don't want to be sensational, but when you work against your own population and your own people, for example, like the lockdowns and the COVID jab, the vaccine. Now, this is getting much more traction. You've been on this from day one. The COVID inquiry is a complete sham, as you and I both predicted. It's a whitewash. Heather Hallett, she that presided over the Good Friday Agreement and the 7/7 bombings, she's been given another easy ball, easy pass, just to keep in the terms of reference, Godfrey. It's all got to be in the terms of reference, but please don't ask where it came from. Don't want to know things like that. What do you think's going to happen with this whole COVID situation of the vaccine injured and vaccine death? And could you give our viewers and listeners a little bit of your insight into the numbers, please? Because you're a financial man, you're an analyst, you're a forecaster, you know insurance, and you understand how insurance companies work. Please give our viewers and listeners an oversight into the whole COVID jab situation.
I finished my career in the city before I went into consultancy work. I think it was in 1993. But I finished as the general manager of a life assurance company because I used to manage life assurance and pension funds. So I'm very familiar with mortality statistics and their analysis, which is largely done by actuaries. I was in the risk, my professional qualifications were risk assessment. But that's not the point. That's not the point. The principle is the same. I understand how it works. Now, just to use an analogy here, what we used to sell was very popular, very easy and very profit-making, was group life assurance. So if you work for Tesco or Morrison's or Sainsbury, if you were working for them, you would have 4 times death in service life assurance. It was automatic. It came up with the rations, and it still does. 4 times your salary was your life assurance if you work for a big organization. Death in service, widow's pension, death in retirement, all that came along. But basically, that was your life assurance, which of course lasted till retirement date, which was probably 65 or 63 or something like that. So you were insuring people, broadly speaking, from 22, 23 to 63. That was your band. Now, in order to get into these companies, in almost any way, in any form, you would have to have some form of medical assessment. So that medical assessment would probably take the form of a medical. Not all companies, but most companies, you would go for a medical. Certainly if you were going to be an executive of any kind, it was part of the procedure. So you were selecting Class A lives, what we used to say Class A lives, because those people were selected. So their life expectancy would be significantly higher than the man on the Clapham omnibus in general. And it was profit-making stuff. But those same institutions insisted that all their people were vaccinated. If you call it vaccinated, jabbed, call it what you will. They insisted upon that. So you had a disproportionate number of people who worked for that company or that institution over and above the man on the Clapham omnibus. Now, what you have is an interesting situation now, that the life expectancy of those people working for those institutions is now not as good as the man on the Clapham omnibus. Now, this brings me to the crunch point. You cannot hide numbers. You can't hide dead bodies. And it's going on, and it's going now. The mainstream media aren't going anywhere near it. Whenever a pilot slumps over the joystick and they have to land in an emergency, which happened only yesterday yet again, it's happening all the time in North America, it's not covered. So everything is being hidden. The number of people, people won't come out and say, it's extraordinary that we're getting people in their late 20s and 30s suffering from heart failure. Who's keeping very quiet? The British Heart Foundation. I used to raise money years ago for the British Heart Foundation. They are deliberately burying this information. Even for a while, and I think it's changing, the Institute of Actuaries are burying it, certainly in Australia, where the numbers are out of control. Now, we've just seen his name escapes me for the moment, but one of the most senior oncologists in the country has said, I'm seeing stuff that I've never seen in my career. You know, I've been a senior oncologist treating cancers, and I'm now 60 years old. I have never seen anything like this. I'm seeing cancers in young women, ovarian cancer, I'm seeing breast cancer in women in their late 20s. This is unheard of. And the numbers are going up 80, 800, 900%. Young men getting myocarditis and this kind of thing. It's off the Richter scale. You can't hide this forever. You can't hide it. Now, they've done a wonderful job of hiding it thus far. And of course, Andrew Bridgen, who spoke out about it, was kicked immediately out of the joint. They're burying it, and they could bury it for another year, another 2 years. But as the story leaks out, the families are being left behind. What happened to my life? I thought something might kick off when that young lady, who I actually knew, died of the jab in BBC Birmingham. Going back 2 years, her name escapes me again, but she died.
Lisa Shaw, Godfrey.
Yeah, perfectly healthy young woman in her early 40s with kids. I thought one of their own. It's one of their own. It's one of the BBC's own. You would have thought, my goodness me, but no, they even buried one of their own. So sooner or later, the numbers are, these people have families, brothers, sisters, that sooner or later they will say, he was fitter to flee, it was 35. And suddenly gets up. Why? Why is this all happening? And the number of, for example, doctors, you could not practice in Canada unless you'd had the jab. You just couldn't practice. Pretty much the same here, but not to the extent of Canada. The number of Canadian doctors who have died is extraordinary. It's off the Richter scale. Hundreds and hundreds of them, young GPs. It can't be hidden forever. Now, the trouble is we have a society, out of sight is out of mind. Look at the disastrous energy policies we've had. And who was running under Cameron, the Liberal Democrat guy, who's now the leader.
Nick Clegg, Facebook executive.
Well, Nick Clegg was one. Sered Davey or somebody, whatever his name is. We are dealing with a disastrous energy policy, but they've gone. See, even I can't remember what Ed Davey. Ed Davey.
Right.
Where's he gone?
He's the leader.
Should be prison.
Yeah.
He should be prison.
Yeah.
Where's all the steel workers in South Wales and Redcar who've lost their jobs because of our energy policy, which has gone now to Korea or China or the Indian subcontinent? Where are they? Because they should be held to account. Nobody is held to account. And that is the problem that we have. Now, Stalin, if you made a balls of commanding a division on the Russian front, you made a balls of it, you were shot.
Yes.
I would like to see a system brought back that if you make a complete and total Horlicks of something, I mean a real Horlicks, like Hunt, for example, our Chancellor, has made a Horlicks of every single job he's ever had. I mean, you know, you've got to think about shooting some of these people, really, haven't you?
Well, look, there's Jeremy Hunt. You just plucked that name out of obscurity. Again, another placement. Liz Truss thought she would save her premiership by installing probably the weakest, most unpopular MP in parliamentary recent years, including Anna Soubry. And there's Hunt and Sunak talking about the dangers of China and hacking, because they probably have hacked their bank accounts, so they know where the money's gone, they know where the bodies are buried. And there's Jeremy Hunt. His wife works for the CCP as one of their top comms people. You couldn't make this up.
No.
I mean, the traitory and the treachery is off the scale. And sadly, they've dragged the monarchy into this as well, Godfrey. And you and I have spoken about KC3, King Charles III, and his decision to become a politician, to stand up. Davos, sorry to say, but Davos is there, backing everything that Klaus Schwab has said. But let's go back in history a little bit, and let's look at Lord Mountbatten and Lord Mountbatten's connections to some very nefarious characters. I don't want to get too deep down that rabbit hole because it involves a lot of abuse, and it involves paedophilia. So these people are they controlled or are they controllers? You once told me, you said you're not sure who's running the World Health the World Economic Forum. You're not sure if it's Klaus Schwab or if it's the king.
Well, it's difficult to guess, but if you see some of the early pictures of Charles and Klaus Schwab together, Charles was a very young man.
Mm.
You know, I don't know, but I haven't worked it out, but I mean, I would say he wouldn't be much more than early 30s when I saw the first photograph of him with Klaus Schwab. I could be a bit wrong, but I'm not far out on that. So those two have been joined at the hip for a very long time. Then, of course, they have that system of, as oligarchs do, and of course, King Charles is an oligarch. He's a monarch and he's a king, but he's an oligarch, isn't he? He's one of the richest men of the world. He, like his father, is a Malthusian. So he wants to see massive, fancy putting, think about Bill Gates, fancy putting somebody in charge of the World Health Organization who actually thinks the population needs cutting by 50%. I mean, really, it makes you laugh. And of course, the other thing, Mark, I know it sounds a bit cruel.
No.
But maybe it's right. Maybe Klaus Schwab is right because all the people queuing up to get another jab, perhaps they deserve to die because they're so stupid.
Well, I'm laughing because it was a humorous statement, but that's all we can do now, Godfrey. It's gallows humor time. It really is. And there are people still queuing up. There's footage online of people in a queue at the vaccination centre. I think it might have been Australia. And they actually watched and witnessed someone going into a seizure moments after having the jab because they have it just out in the open. It's probably some truck driver or somebody working in a 7-Eleven out in the middle of whoop whoop in Australia that's delivering this jab. And not one person got up and got the hell out of there.
You and I would have gone, oh, bugger that.
Well, we wouldn't have been there in the first place.
Well, I would have been there to start. But even if I had been there, let's assume I was thicko in the queue. Even I would have gone, oh, I don't want any of that. But, what could you do? You can't help people who won't help themselves. What could you do?
Well, look, we put out a reminder to everybody. We're kind of naming and shaming. Old Jeremy Clarkson. I don't know if you've ever met Jeremy. If you ever,
I have not had that dubious pleasure.
Well, I think you and him would have got on great because you say it like you say it. You say what you like and you like what you say and all those good old terms. But there's Jeremy Clarkson, and he looked like something from Schindler's List, saying, "How old are you, mother? Would you like to come in this way and have your shower? Do you use soap or gas?" And it was like something from the offcuts of Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List. And he's guiding all these oldies in. And as it turns out, it transpires. It's a death shot. It screws with your T-cell reproduction. It causes myocarditis. The lipo nanoparticles that were first thought not to be dissipated anywhere in the body are resting in the heart, the lung, the brain, the testicles, the ovaries, all the essential organs for reproduction, funnily enough. So we've seen a massive spike in stillbirths, and women's menstrual cycles are all screwed. So there's a whole plethora. And the average life expectancy, correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually gone down by 2 or 3 years now. So
it's gone down marginally in North America, which tends to lead the way because they have a very sophisticated actuarial system and way of assessing things. So certainly that is true. And I don't quite understand why I don't understand generally why anybody would have anything injected into their body without knowing anything about it at all. I mean, I'd want to know what it was all about. But I have, as I'm sure you have, I have some very good friends who are otherwise extremely okay, intelligent. I could, I'm talking about a dozen at least off the top of my head. And to every other intents and purposes, of relatively intelligent people, all of whom queued up to get the jab and the boosters. And sadly, of course, I won't go into details, but I mean, a number now are 2 with cancer, 1 with heart trouble. Yeah. But they don't make that mental association, Mark.
No.
They just think it's an extraordinary coincidence. And I tell you what, don't try and tell them either. They'll go
No,
bouncing
because
off the wall and shout at you.
maybe it's cognitive dissonance. It's just too much to comprehend to let that settle in, that we have a benevolent government who have nothing but contempt for us, so much so that they're happy for us to go to an early grave. That's probably too much for a lot of people, Godfrey. But
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
that's the reality. Now, please, with the time that we have, central banking digital currency. It's coming, isn't it? They've announced it, that it is going to happen. What can people do? I'm fascinated by your insight into what the recommendations or advice or expertise, let's put it, that you put out there about what people should do with their investments, with their savings. Anybody that hasn't seen Godfrey's work on investments and buying and selling stocks and shares, it's incredible work that you do. And obviously, as a disclaimer, you're not recommending anybody does any of this. They can look at it. But Bitcoin, silver, gold, what's the feeling out there that you have that people should maybe look at in investments?
I think you have to basically, the only thing you can do is take your money off the table, because we're living in a casino society. And the thing to do is get out of it. How do you get out of it? Well, there's only three things you can do to take your money off the table. And that is gold coinage, which is coin of the realm, which doesn't involve VAT and doesn't involve capital gains tax. So gold coins of small denominations, sovereigns, are best. Of that, there is no doubt. And it stood the test of time, 5,000 years. Gold is a store of value for 5,000 years. And if if I'm speaking at a university, I happen to have a sovereign which I hold up in the air and I say, it happens to be 1905. It's a 1905 sovereign. That's not relevant. But what is relevant is a 1905 sovereign, which is sort of like a pound coin in those days. That would have bought you bed and breakfast in a reasonably okay London hotel, or New York, or Paris, or Berlin. Fast forward to 2024, a gold sovereign will buy you bed and breakfast in a reasonably good hotel. It's a store of wealth, not an investment. It's a store of wealth. So that's gold coins. Excuse me. Silver is very cheap at the moment, but it's also an industrial metal. It's heavily controlled and shorted in Wall Street by the usual gangsters like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. In this country, it carries 20% VAT, and it's selling at a premium. So your coin will sell at a 10% premium, at least. So you're paying 30% over spot price. So if you're a resident of the United Kingdom, it's not really a good investment for you. It's got to go up a hell of a long way for you to start breaking in to profit. That day will probably come, but it's more risky. Your other take it off the table is Bitcoin, which is two things. It's significantly higher risk. It can sort of go up 25% overnight, but it can go down 25% overnight. And it's only got a very, it's only just turned up historically. We're only talking about sort of 15 years or whatever it is that Bitcoin turned out. So it has no real track record. And what track record you could actually see, it tends to perform like a tech stock. And if you look at tech stocks, the tech stock index, you'll see Bitcoin tends to run along with it up and down. And at the moment, of course, it's doing very well, and that's fine. But I think it depends on how long you've got. Now, if you're an old geezer like me, you can't afford long distance stuff now. You want to consolidate your wealth. And the only way you can really do that is gold coins. If you're a young man watching this, if you're 25 years old watching this and you've got time to get through the volatility of Bitcoin, you can afford to ride the waves and sit out the slumps. Bitcoin is an option. But if you're like me, or probably you, Mark, who worked all your lives and got a bit put by, and all you want to do is protect it. You don't want to make a bucket load of dough. You just want to make sure it keeps its spending power. Gold coins are the best. On my website, there is a page on gold, and I've interviewed some of the top gurus like Alistair MacLeod, Claudio Grass, some of the top people in the gold bullion market globally to talk about it. And obviously I was an investment manager myself. I made my money, such as it is, which incidentally is not a great deal, but I made my money in equities in the 90s, broadly speaking. And I went right through the 90s with some very good stock picks that I made. Okay, yeah, maybe lucky, perhaps lucky, but anyway, I made them. Then when I got to however old I was, I got to 55 years old, and I said, I want to retain the money I've made there in those portfolios. I don't want to make any more. And that was a time, and since that time, which was round about the year 2000, gold bullion has gone up round about 8.7% per year since that time. Yeah. I'm happy with that. Most people will be happy with that. But I do recommend if people look at my website, please do. It's free. You don't have to pay anything to subscribe. It's not a pay as you go thing. It's totally free. It will tell you all you need to know about gold. Everything to the history of gold, opinion on gold, graphs, everything is there for you to make your own decision. And there's also a list of people I trust, gold bullion dealers that I trust and use probably on my wife's account. And they wouldn't be on there if I wasn't comfortable.
Exactly.
They wouldn't be there. So if you want to do that, because some people say, oh, it's all right for you, Bloom, because I don't have any money. Well, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about that. If you don't have any money, I can't save it. But then if you don't have any money, you can't lose it. But if you do have a bit put by, I would suggest gold, but it's up to you. My job now, pro bono publico, is to make sure I've given enough information on my website about health and finances and the WF for you to make your own decision. There's no big pharma. There's no big banking gangsters on it. There's nobody. It's all for you to make your own decision about these matters, whether it's health, whether it's climate change. I have a very big page on climate change with experts all over the world who aren't on the take. For people like Professor Ian Plimer, one of the great geologists, some top people who are Nobel Prize winners in physics who say there is no climate enlargement. Get informed. Knowledge is power. Absolutely. Knowledge is power. If you want to protect your family, get informed. That means don't watch the BBC. That's the first thing you do, is don't watch the BBC, because that's misinformation. That's disinformation. And dig down. You don't have to dig down too deep, actually, to find out the truth of the matter, and make your own call. Make your own call.
Fantastic advice. And I think a lot of people, when they watch presentations that you do, they read your website, they look at the graphs. This stuff isn't as complicated as they may think. It is quite simple in its purest form, is that you buy the gold in a physical form in specie, and you have it stored with a reputable firm or company, or if you have the facilities, you keep it yourself somewhere safe. Is that fair?
You must hold it. If it's gold, you must hold it. Not at a bank. Basically, if you've got a lot of it in a safe deposit, well, I've got too much. I don't keep gold at home.
Sure.
But for the simple reason,
sure.
For obvious reasons.
Sure.
But there are plenty of independent safe deposit boxes, and they don't need to know what's in it. You buy the key and you buy the box. And some people put pearl necklaces in, or very important family documents. Nobody knows it's in there. Now, I'd say one thing on this, because it's only fair to give everything. It's all on my website, incidentally.
Yeah.
It's all on my website. There is an audit trail if you buy gold. So let's say you buy £20,000 worth of gold from whomsoever, Gold Bullion Limited or whatever it is. There is an audit trail that means that if the government ever want to know, they want to know, they are obliged to file that information. That falls off a log basically after 6 years.
Mm.
After 6 years, the financial regulatory authorities you do not need to keep records at all. So if you bought gold 10 years ago,
Yes.
there's no way really that anybody can find out whether you've got it still, or ask you to make any explanation of it or things like that. That doesn't mean to say, and I try and explain this to Bitcoiners as well, hodlers, if the government want to steal it, they can. They can steal whatever you've got.
Yeah.
If they can tell us how many people we can have at a dinner party, if they can abandon habeas corpus and put Julius Assange in solitary confinement year after year after year, they can do what they like. And Bitcoiners say, yes, but I wouldn't give them my password for my wallet.
No, that's right.
How long do you think you'd last in solitary confinement in Belmarsh before you coughed it up?
Exactly. And on the Bitcoin front, a lot of our followers, Godfrey, always worry about Bitcoin because the internet can be taken down at any time. They can hit the kill switch on Bitcoin or the national grid. You put it perfectly well. Occam's razor, A to B. If you've got it physically in your hand, or you can access it at one of these reputable storage facilities, one of these little private banks with the safety deposit boxes. If you can do that, fantastic, get it done. But the thing that I worry about with Bitcoin, I do have a little bit, but what I worry about is if they hit the kill switch on the internet and take it down. That's a concern.
And of course, the thing to bear in mind in there with blockchain, it has an audit trail forever.
Yeah,
it's a permanent audit trail, so they can find out from whom you bought it and from whom that person bought it. And of course, if you find that you've had drug dealers and so down the blockchain, you've had drug dealers money and stuff like that, it makes it easier to confiscate. You're much better off if you don't have much money, which is like most of us really, I suppose, and you can only afford sort of 10 sovereigns, which is £5 worth of sovereigns or something like that, whatever it is. If nobody knows you've got it, you can pop it in the tea caddy. You don't have to make a big deal of the thing. If you don't have that much of it, you can put it in the tea. Nobody knows you've got it. It's only if that's the reason I have safe deposit boxes in London and somewhere else. It's for the simple reason that I do a lot of talking about gold.
Sure.
And I don't want somebody knocking on the door and say, you always talk about, you must have a whole load of it in your house. Well, the answer is no. Everybody, no, I don't. No, I don't. Don't come around asking for it because I don't have it here.
We'll make that clear. That smart people will not have substantial amounts of anything in their house with value these days. No. What with the police as they are? I mean, we've covered two of the biggest subjects, which is for any country or for any citizens. We've covered the economy and we've covered the defence of the realm a little bit, but we haven't spoken much about the British Army or the state of our own armed forces. I mean, do you care to say a little bit about Grant Shapps? I mean, what is going on here? Shapps has seemingly lost when he says that he's still claiming that Putin, I hate to take you back to the war in Ukraine, but he's still claiming that Russia are going to move all the way over to the west and try and control 500 million people that have no resources. I mean, it's insanity.
As a geopolitical strategist, trained and qualified, not the man at the golf club who's read the Daily Express, who's always got an opinion. Mine is based on training and assessment. Russia is the biggest country in the world. It has also more natural resources than almost anywhere else in the world. What on earth? What would they want with bloody Latvia or Estonia or Luxembourg or Poland or Romania? They don't want it, do they? Who wants it?
They don't need it.
They're not going to come any further.
Yeah.
And all they wanted to do was to stop NATO putting missiles within 800 miles of Moscow. So they're not interested in coming. And the other thing that you hear from Grant Shapps, you've got to laugh really or cry. He obviously has no idea about military capability. Now, the British Army could not put more than two brigades in the field, operational brigades, with the logistics supply. 2 brigades. The Russians have at least 150 fully trained and fully supported brigades.
Yeah.
I used to do a bit of boxing in the army many years ago. I do not intend to put my gloves on and go and fight Mike Tyson because I'm keeping fit in my old age, because I wouldn't last very long. We wouldn't last more than 3 days if we mobilized against the Russians. In fact, I think their only chance was that the Russians would all die laughing.
Yeah, it's extraordinary that this still gets peddled, and again in the mainstream media, it's never quizzed or questions. How would they control 500 million people? What would they want with the UK? All we've got is 5- and 4-star hotels full of illegal migrants.
Yeah, they're all full.
They're full. They don't want to know. It would be a blight on the lands. The resources are unlimited. They've got thousands of years worth of coal and gas and oil, and they're using it to great extent. And the sanctions we've put on them have actually made them wealthier. They're actually doing business now with China, India. The BRICS alliance is booming. There are 20 countries queuing up to join the BRICS alliance.
Yeah, that went well for us, didn't it?
Yeah,
that went well. And let me just tell you something else that a lot of people don't understand.
Yes, sir.
And that is the ECB, or the European Union, is talking about confiscating 300 billion of Russia's reserves. Now, let me just very quickly explain how that would work out. That means that nobody in the world would ever trust London, Brussels, or Wall Street again. So consequently, everybody would say, well, if they can confiscate Russian 300 billion pounds, we're going to sell our Eurobonds to start with. That would collapse the Eurobond market. That would put interest rates up in Western Europe to about 15 or 16%. And it would the knock-on effect with American T-bills. It would be a disaster for the bond market, which is already going down the lavatory, because everybody will go, I'm not going to buy any more dollar bonds or euro bonds or sterling gilts, because they can wake up one morning and steal them. And so consequently, it would be a disaster. Now, I used to do some commercial lecturing when I worked for a big investment bank for the young chaps coming in from university to explain how certain things worked, because I used to run fixed interest and explain all these things to them. And it is fascinating, it seems to me, that you can be a decision maker at the IMF, a decision maker at the European Union, or senior to even contemplate confiscating somebody's money without realizing what the knock-on effect would be in the bond market. Massive collapse, which is why, of course, Russia and China and the Asiatic countries are all buying gold. Who's the biggest gold buyers on the planet? Central bankers. And if they're buying gold, you can bait a sweet bippy, they know which way it's going. So if it's good for a central bank, it's good for you and your family.
Yeah, this month alone, 8.7% increase in gold, and the gold shares have rocketed up in the last month, in the last week in particular as well, up £36 in this week alone. But you're absolutely correct. So the central digital banking currency is the last throw of the dice for the West, isn't it? To try and get everybody under control. So there is a social credit score. Nigel Farage, your old colleague in your Brussels years, he put the light under it. He shone the light on it, and there was 375,000 Brits had been taken to task by the banks. And this should be illegal, surely to God, Godfrey. This all falls in with the ESG, DEI diktats that seem to be cleansing us of a cultural, it's like a cultural genocide, as we put it out there, by the UN's own definition. When you attack a country for its history, its traditions, its language, its sensibilities. How do we stop these people getting away with cultural murder?
You have to really, I would suggest that you have to just start on the micro level. You and your family. You buy gold, you buy your gold coins, which will always be a currency. You will always be able to buy something with gold coins, as history shows us. It's as well to also have a significant supply of things like tin food, calagas, handles,
Sure.
all the generator if you can afford one, and it's suitable for where you are. We have we're small, honey, so we've got a generator.
Medicines as well, that type of thing.
Yes, stuff that you need. Just basically take the view you're going for a country cottage for your holiday, but you're not going for a fortnight.
No.
You're going for a couple of years. What would you take? And here's a totally interesting tip. You might have known this. I didn't know until somebody told me some years ago now, and he was an expert in these weird matters. Tinned sardines and stuff like that, they get better the longer you keep them.
Wow.
And there is a premium in places like France. So if you've got to say tinned sardines, which are 15 years old,
yes,
there's a premium on those. Apparently they get better, like some sorts of wine. And of course, they're always there, full of protein. I know everybody laughs at it. Spam, corned beef.
Yeah.
Stay alive, water.
Sure.
If you don't have
peanut butter's another good one.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that you can just get yourself, and I'm not going to get myself into any trouble, but make sure that you can arm yourself from any intruders.
Yes.
However you may do that is none of my business. But I can say, don't break into my house in the middle of the night. You really, really will come unstuck.
See the Tony Martin story for anyone interested. Interested. Well, look, finally, we've covered so much ground, but something that is happening, and I think it's significant for the United Kingdom and the West, its future, is this US presidential election. Now, I don't know if you've been following closely the indictments that President Trump is under. What's your thoughts on President Trump? I don't think we've spoken much about him. And do you think he'll make a difference if elected? What will change?
I think there are one or two things. Let's start off with the positives. I think he will stop America involving itself in any more war or getting in any deeper. I think he will be quite right to certainly disestablish NATO as we see it and get it back to what it was supposed to be, which was a defensive organization, which is not now. It's an aggressive organization. I think he will this time, or he failed last time, is to sort out the southern border. That would be good for America, which he should have done last time but didn't. My worry is he has no concept of economic strategy. The national debt in America shot up when he was in power. So if you look at the numbers, he didn't stop spending. He increased the defense budget. He did all sorts of very, very stupid things. He didn't drain the swamp because he wasn't determined enough. And what he has to do, and Scott Ritter is sound on this in my view,
yes,
you have to mobilize US Marshals. You must arrest the senior members of the FBI who are politically now corrupted. The CIA, close down the CIA and get rid of these people that keep America permanently at war. The last man, of course, who tried to do that was President Kennedy. And of course, they shot him. Or America will fail. America will fail. And I wrote an article 10 years ago for Going Postal, I think it was. A bit less than that. I don't see America can stay as the United States because it's a failed concept. California has nothing in common at all with South Dakota. Massachusetts has nothing in common at all with Florida or Texas. They are so different. I don't think they can exist in the same sphere. So I think that is going to have to break sooner or later, as it should have done in 1861. And this is very controversial because a lot of people imagine that the war started because it was to stop slavery, which is an unbelievably naive and ill-informed view. It doesn't work. America has, since 1776, been at war for every single year except 15 or 16 years. There's something wrong with America. It is like Prussia in the 1890s. It's a militaristic dynamic. There is one solution, perhaps, maybe easier, and I've never heard Trump talk about it. You get back the Constitution, which is a fantastic document, and you enforce it ruthlessly.
Yeah.
Ruthlessly. And that is a good document. That's what should be the basis of their government. How he would go about virtually jailing every single congressman who's on the take from the industrial military congressional complex, which Eisenhower warned us about in 1960. And of course, he took out the word, as you well know, Mark, he took out the word congressional. His advisor said, take it out, but it's the industrial military congressional complex. That's killing America. And it will finish America. Is Trump the man to stop it? I don't know. He's got a lot of changing to do. He's got a lot to do.
Absolutely, and many followers to our channel chime in, and I'm sure yours do as well. They chime in that he introduced the vaccines. He's all behind the vaccines, even to this day. It's one of those blots on his copybook that he just cannot get rid of, and he'll have to live with that. Personally, I think it's hard to find anybody worse than the Biden-Obama regime, and it may well stop the war, but he has got a lot to do to remove the deep state, or to try and cleanse himself of the rats and traitors inside the FBI and the CIA, just as we do with MI5 and MI6.
Oh, yes, I must make it very clear now. I wasn't trying to pretend that we have all the same problems on a smaller scale. I'm not suggesting it's America's fault. I was disappointed that Nigel Farage had an opportunity to really cover some ground. I think it was a blown opportunity. I think he should have put Trump on the rack about the Constitution, about the national debt, about being a client state of Israel. I mean, now talk about the tail wagging the dog. Lost opportunity. But then they're friends. It seems that they're friends. I suppose if you go and you get a scoop interview,
sure,
you're not going to put the guy on the rack, are you? But if he'd been in front of me, he would not have had such a comfortable ride.
Well, if he'd been in front of you, it would have been 10 times bigger, 100 times more sensational and explosive. And I always like the way you deal with people, certain people, like Michael Crick. We can't watch that clip often enough, Godfrey. It's a blessing to us all. It really is. And we're just sorry you didn't have your cricket bat with you that day. He got off the hook lightly. But just one final stretch. I'm really pushing you to the limits here. I hope you don't mind. But in Scotland, on the 1st of April, your cousins up north are going to be faced with hate crime laws and hate crime bills. So people like myself, voicing an opinion or a view, a fantastic English gentleman like yourself, I can be reported for a hate crime. Now, that hate crime will stay on my record, even if it's proven that it was just a formed view and it was not racial or attacking anyone from the protected categories. There's 7 of them, I believe. Like Murdo Fraser, an MSP in Scotland right now, has been reported for views that he gave on the gender recognition bill. This was in light of taking a rapist, Godfrey, a male rapist, and putting it into prison next to women, some of whom had been raped. Now, if I'd spoken out against this, and I have, I can historically be traced back. I'm expecting a knock at the door. I don't know if you've had a knock at the door yourself, sir, or things that you've said. But how do you recommend that people like myself, little channels, deal with this situation?
It's very difficult and it's very disappointing. I'm 20% jock myself, the Clan Bruce. And funny enough, in 2 weeks' time, I'm touring Scotland, as we do every 5 or 6 years. And I'm looking forward to that. And funny enough, you may think this is fanciful, but I feel the Scottish blood when I'm up there. I feel there's a bit of me connected with it.
Yes.
But of course, the tragedy is when you think of the Enlightenment, the Scottish Enlightenment, and all those great names and the great engineers and the great statesmen.
Yes.
How is it that Scotland punched above its weight for so long? It was the Protestant work ethic. it was the educational system, it was the legal system, and of course locked into the empire as well, where there was so much room for Scotsmen to punch above their weight individually, because we controlled half the globe, and so there was always a job for an engineer or a doctor, and of whom, of course, the Scots filled all these roles. I went to Stirling University about 5 years ago to give a speech on how Scotland could survive on its own if it adopted Austrian school economics. I was banned at Stirling University advocating Scottish independence. And the reason that they wouldn't let me on was because we don't know what you might say. And this is, how has Scotland moved? How has Scotland moved? England's, incidentally, again, I say, England's no bloody better.
No.
How did Scotland go from, I would argue, being one of the global leaders of small countries? It was the definitive small country in the 16th century, since I might say the Act of Union, perhaps. I think it's not unreasonable. So I would say it's a tragedy. And of course, there's something wrong, again, with the electoral system. They go on putting back either the Labour Party or the SNP because all the huge electoral belt is in the sort of Glasgow belt along that part and Paisley, and they're going up that bit. And of course, the people who all vote SNP and Labour there are really quite stupid, and they're not reflective. All the real brains in Scotland are in Charlotte Square, aren't they? Or down here, or down here.
Australia, America,
So there's no Scotsman there. I think all the Scotsmen should go back there and kick some ass and bring Scotland back to where it would be.
God, that would be nice. It's an old saying, and it's said for many places, but a lot of people say Scotland is a great place to come from, but not a great place to live. And that may well be fair about many parts of the United Kingdom now, formerly fantastic parts. But this hate crime law is coming in, and this is from Hamza Yusuf is his name. I better say it correctly. This is the man that stood up and said that there were far too many white people in positions of authority in Scotland. One of the most racist statements that we've ever heard from Holyrood. If you change that white to black or brown, he would be doing serious time right now. So this really typifies the war against white working class men, or just white men in general, white heterosexual seniors as well. Godfrey, you're in this category, I'm sure. You're definitely white heterosexual, and you don't mind me saying you're senior. You're senior to me, sir. And I say that with the utmost of respect. We now seem to be fair game. So what your recommendations are to us? You get a knock at the door, and what do we do?
I've had the knock on the door a few years ago because somebody complained about something I tweeted, and it was ludicrous. I mean, he couldn't even begin to get. And the policeman knocked on my door and said, could I go down and make a statement and be interviewed at the police station? So I said, with the best will in the world, bugger off. You could come back, you can arrest me, or bugger off. They're your two choices, sunshine, all right? He buggered off. And I got my lawyer on it, and my lawyer sent him a letter because I got his name, Sergeant Snoopsy Poo, whatever his name was.
Sure.
Poor bloke, totally out of his depth. But aren't they all? Aren't they all? And he wrote, and it was a fantastic letter. It was bugger off in legalese, and he stayed buggered. But now that the law is so bad, the National Security Act, this law that's coming in, there's nowhere to run to. But then if it's trial by jury, 12 good Scotsmen and women and true should just throw it out. And it doesn't matter, of course, you will know this too, Mark, under the system of law that we have, the judge can direct them how he likes. The judge can say, under law, under the statute law, you must find him guilty. They don't have to. Those jurors can say no.
That's right.
It's not the man on the Clapham omnibus, it's the man on the Glasgow tram. He can stop it. But of course, then we have another problem. Jury service. You're 18 years old, you can be a juror. Did you ever hear of anything that stupid?
No.
A man from Mars would never believe it. You used to be over 21 and a householder, so you could guarantee your jury would have some common sense, some depth. Now it can be anybody you like.
Well, the SNP Green Alliance, this is probably the worst combination that you could ever get. Probably since Fred and Rosemary West, there's never been a more toxic alliance than these two. They're obviously pushing that younger people have bodily autonomy and can make decisions about their medical affairs without their parents' say so. And we've seen the indoctrination, Godfrey, of the children on a relentless basis, that they can change their gender before they can decide their bedtime. There's the groups that we've spoken to, like the Family Party we have up here, a gentleman called Richard Lucas. We don't agree about a lot of things with Richard, but we do on family values. They're a Christian party, a genuine Christian party, that say that, I'm sorry, as a protected category as Christians, we don't want our children indoctrinated down to this sort of this mantra about transgenderism. And that's where they think the first call's going to be. The parents that are out on the streets, outside the schools, campaigning that their children not be subject to this level of indoctrination when it comes to their sex lives. And I mean, what kind of people think about this, Godfrey? What kind of sickos think about this stuff all day?
I have so many friends. I'm very fortunate. I've got a lot of younger friends. Because of my, I won't bore you with the details, but I'm very lucky I have younger friends.
Sure.
They're all opting for home education. They're just taking their kids out. And they've shown me some of the material that is being handed to the kids of 11 years old. And it's the same in Wales, of course, as you know. You simply do two things. And it's not always easy. Take your children out of the state school, the state education system. Get together with other like-minded parents and do home education, point one. And I've said this a million times. Don't pay the BBC. You'd be amazed how many people don't watch it, don't like it, hate it, but go on with their banker's order. For goodness sake, cancel your banker's order. Because if you're paying the BBC, half of this is your fault. Don't be a moron. Stop your payment.
You're absolutely right. Look, we'll give you the final word. It's amazing to find out you're coming up to Scotland. I'm definitely going to get a wee dram with you, hopefully. Well,
I would hope so.
Yeah, you more than one wee dram. If I've got anything to do with it, sir, and your forum tells me that you do like a little drop of something.
I am partial.
You are partial, sir, and a few interesting jokes as well. We'll share. But look, just tell us a little bit about the tour finally, and anything that you haven't said so far in this megalith of an interview. I'll leave you with the final few words and sentiments for us all.
Well, if I may once more plug my website, because it's free. It's pro bono publico. I'm not making a buck. And I have lots of volunteer researchers. I have someone all over the world who send me really good stuff, which I otherwise wouldn't have discovered myself. And as I say again, if it's financial or it's health or it's WEF or it's climate, and all these things are interlinked. It's all interlinked. And you can make yourself an expert with that expertise. And I say, it's not because I'm a clever boy. I've got other people helping me with it. Volunteers, city people, physicians, immunologists, top people give me their stuff and their names are on it. It's not anonymous, and knowledge is power. If you drill down on whichever one of those subjects interests, so when, for example, your daughter comes back from school telling you that the world's going to boil because of man-made carbon dioxide, it's there. It's all there, disproving all this nonsense, and it's in graphic form. There's colored charts, there's everything. Anybody can understand. You don't have to be particularly clever. It's all there. Certainly school children can look at it. Youngsters can look at it and go, and go back. If you go back to school, print it off and say, you know, Miss McPherson, yeah, what about this?
Yeah.
You know, what about the Phoenician warm period, the Minoan warm period, the Roman warm period, the mini ice age? Look, it's all here. It's got nothing to do with atmospheric coming. What's wrong with that chart? Because she won't know.
Yeah.
She won't know. She's just a graded grain who tick the boxes. She's not like the sort of people that are the old school teachers, Presbyterian school teachers in the Scottish schools of yesteryear, masters of their class and masters of young destinies. These people are placemen who do as they're told. And if they must go to school there, and go up, mug up yourself. So when it's parents' night, why are you teaching my children fake science? Make yourself an expert. And I can tell you, it doesn't take very much. If you drill down on the website, I reckon that you could make yourself on one of those things, maybe a fortnight, certainly to know more than anybody else that you meet in the pub or at the school or anywhere else. So the website, it's all there. And if anybody contacts me via the website, you'll get an answer. Yeah. I will respond. I'll get there. It might take a few days, but I'll get there. So if you've got a question, whether it's on finance or anything else, but you will find that if you drill down, it's there. A lot of people ask me questions. I go, well, it's actually there. You know, you didn't spend enough. You only spent 5 minutes browsing it. It's there. Spend a bit of time. And knowledge will save us all. Knowledge and determination will save us all. We are a great nation. Scotland's a great nation. We are a great nation. Britain is a great nation. And we will bounce back again.
Hear, hear to all of that. We are a great nation and you are a great Britain, sir. You really are. And it's an honour for Herd Immunity News to have invited you on and for you graciously to give us your time. Everything you said, we back up 100%. We'll leave all the links, as always, to your fantastic work. It is a one-stop shop for all of the crises that we're facing right now. And there are solutions on there to give you hope and see that little flicker of light in the darkness. We will get there. And we really look forward to having you back on at some stage in the future. But for now, Mr. Godfrey Bloom, thank you very much for appearing on Herd Immunity News.
Thank you.